I would like to use this opportunity as to communicate from the perspective of computer scientists of even the aspect of I've been interacting with some of you and many of you at the ISOQOL, and we meet and I get these feedbacks. And there was one year I was even a keynote speaker and there was this presentation, and I think it's interesting to see how much we still need to breach from the mixed method perspective, but also from the perspective of even different cultures. So I started this lab on quality of life technologies, and oh boy, I did not know what I'm getting into, right? So there are moments also like, what did I get into? So I would like to today talk about the difficulty of digital biomarkers and how can we, most likely you heard about this, like digital health and digital biomarkers, all these keywords and fancy things. And where I see a difficulty, and I would like to get your opinion as well, and also understand how can we together push this forward. Well, as I said, I was I'm leading the lab since many years, and first it was Geneva, then I moved to Denmark, and then Stanford, and then again Geneva right now as a full professor. I'm really grateful, but mostly I'm hiring my computer science students, and I'm teaching them and getting into human-computer interaction and getting into qualitative methods. And some of them are so keen on machine learning and just give me the data. I don't want to talk to humans, but you know, it's a culture aspect and culture shift. I would start. Somebody needs to mute, so I'm sorry, that may be disturbing. Well, I'll start with the definition of the biomarker, which most likely all of you know, where we have a characteristics of measure of indicator of normal biological processes, pathogenic responses to exposure intervention, and it's molecular, histologic, radiographic, physiological characteristics, and it's not assessment of individual fields, functions, survives. That's where that's what we care about, right? And then FDA recently published in 2022, there was this Nature paper, very short one, opinion paper, when they said, now we are setting up a scene for digital biomarkers, setting up the scene. That sounds like a crime, a digital biomarker definition. And they kind of left us with adding that defined characteristics of set of characteristics collected from digital health technologies. Then they leave out this other aspect. And then there is no comment on assessments of how individual fields function and survives. So that's how FDA left us with, given the paper. And then it's like, then it was all over the news, claims to stop misuse digital biomarker and yes, set the record straight and definitions. So who comes into help to persons like me, but also to community of overall quality of life? Also, before I get into further, I want to say that FDA is also defining at very high level digital health technologies as a hardware and software, anything being using to collect the patient data remotely. And as you can see inside the software, there could be clinical outcome assessment, there could be ePro, digitalized patient-reported outcomes, electronic patient diaries. So who comes in help is being called for, like what else we're doing and how can we clarify it? So there's in the left low corner, you can see Digital Medicine Society. Maybe you heard about this society. It's a group of persons from industry, pharma. There is also scientists. There are maybe some of you are also into specific work groups, and then they set up the scene for how can we operationalize this definition, how can we do best, and also for pharma to assure that whatever is being developed from digital health perspective is going to be really meeting the requirements of FDA. So they get together, and here we have a big picture. It's a very overloaded picture, but I will try to get through it. So first, as we can imagine, as whenever you are developing new pro, or some of you are going into discussion of with what happens, what matters for patients, right? So what matters, meaningful aspects of health. It's a first stepping stone, first point, and then thinking about sensors. Then we're going into mapping into what does it mean for the sensor perspective, what we should measure, and where is the sensor? And then the first point before we get into the box of digital measure is how can we assure that the variables, the data collected by the digital health technology, which is a sensor in this case, are being then labeled with a PROs, right? So with a PRO, which is how the patient feels, functions, survives, or other clinical data. But in many cases, for quality of life, we're talking about PRO, this patient-reported outcome, the self-report. And then only after we have a really good understanding that the sensor is measuring accurately, reliably, and then it can be labeled by the answer from PRO, then we get into further validation steps and further technical validation. The first part is already technical validation, the sensor and then PRO, and then we get into this demonstration, digital COA or digital biomarker, where we get into measuring of well-defined and reliable assessments. So for digital COA, or below is the biomarker, is correlation of known measurement of disease. And then in this particular big box, we are getting into understanding really how does it even, how can it be even operationalized in clinical settings and clinical trials or research. And I think generally, when I look at the whole domain, I look at all my colleagues in computer science and everybody working in digital phenotyping and biomarkers, I think we're still a lot. We are in the first box. I just wanted to get your opinion on this, because I think there's a lot of papers. We co-calibrate yet another sensor data with yet another outcome, and then we kind of leave it there, and then it's really hard getting into. I mean, I know there's a lot of clinical trials, but there's a lot of effort in computer science, which is unfortunately stopping there, and unfortunate as well. And the worst I see as a computer scientist is somebody develops yet another sensor for something, and they just look for the nail, like they look for what to measure and how, and they can push it in the need, right? So only, and then everything then for respect to regulation relates to the context of use, and so how is this data interpreted? So in our lab, and you know this. Wilson Clary, like a model of clinical variables and in the relation of quality of life, we're looking into the quality of life and health perceptions of PROs, and then we're looking into from digital health perspective and the digital biomarkers. So how can we quantify it? And we actually call it TechROs, following Nancy Mayo taxonomy of this different information, clinical variables and other information coming to decision-making model. So we have a biological, physiological variable, symptoms, then functional, then there's individual, there's environment. So we have like a big picture here, and then also now here we have a Nancy Mayo taxonomy of patient-reported outcomes and other outcomes which matter. So when you look from the left-hand side quickly, it's a patient-reported outcome, patient as a source. And then on the right-hand side, we have a clinician performance-reported outcome and technology-reported outcome. And then the biomarkers, the original definition of biomarkers, it's inside technology-reported outcomes. And it's anything like biopsy, blood, X-rays. So any of this like hard outcomes, hard endpoints. And then we add these wearables, which is not even mentioned. I talked to Nancy, it's not even mentioned in the original paper, and we add these wearables, and we say, okay, now we are adding this additional data sources, which is not a performance-based, because in performance would be meaning that we ask people to do 6-minute walk test or do some specific performance evaluation of their functioning, while technology reported outcomes in the free living, we get into like how they sleep overall and how they move around overall. And in the middle, there is observant proxy, as you know. So that I also wanted to say, this is very useful for all the students in computer science as well, as I understand, like they do some imaging. It's like, okay, imaging is in this box. And then whenever they do some other aspect of natural language processing for electronic health records, oh, that's a clinician reported outcomes, that's the notes, clinical notes. So it's very interesting and important that we have this kind of meta model, like where are the searches, and also like what are the methods we're using to collect this different data, and what do we correlate with what, and further. So the peer-reported outcomes, as we can imagine, are quite infrequent and contextless. There may be subjective rater-based memory bias. There may be burdensome, depends on the study design. Social acceptable answers. Oh my God, I learned so much sexuality now, working on sexual health, and then quite qualitative. And the bigger pictures, as we have these technologies around us, without the push, they're already there. they are being accepted and available. And already a phone was many years ago around us 88% of the time on average. And now you have all these different wearables. So being curious as we are in our lab, we have done this scrapping of some different databases, and we have identified, for example, 438 wearables back in 2018. So the digital health technologies. And what this figure shows is like where can those be on the body? What is the position on the body, different devices, and what do they measure? What's this outcome? And I'm not saying that they're validated. I'm not saying that they are accurate. I'm just saying they're just out off the shelf consumer grade wearables which exist, and we've been testing many of those, and also like being curious like what exists and what's there and who is surviving. Because actually I have to tell you that 2 years later, I did 2020, I scrapped all the same databases, and almost half of the websites were not responsive, and the companies did not exist or get been absorbed by others. So it's very quickly changing field when you get into this non-medical grade wearables. So I also would like to say, how do we, getting back to good quality of life as a patient-reported outcome, I decided for the lab, because we've been doing different European projects, working with different groups, and decided to be as a bigger umbrella, the biggest umbrella we can have. It's a World Health Organization definition of quality of life. And specifically, we're interested in the domains which were established by these experts, and some of you may know more the history of this scale of this instrument. And there's a physical health, psychological health, social relationships, and environmental, and then they call it facets, which we kind of think like, oh, they're variables. We should collect data for those, and we should quantify it as accurately as possible. And out of 24 of this today, as I'm standing here, I can tell you that in different projects, actually I should have added sexual activity as a 14. There are 14 out of 24 which we worked out in our lab, and one day I want to have 44, but it's in many cases different projects in which we evaluate these things separately. Sometimes we only look at sleep and physical activity, and sometimes on nutrition and physical activity. Like, it depends on the project, and as you can imagine, it's not yet like comprehensive model of all these different behaviors and causalities. It's not there. There's a lot of correlations, and sometimes we stop at correlation, the project finishes, we're frustrated. In many cases, these are pros, and then we build these computational models, the digital biomarkers. And in some projects, we look into how do we bend the curve, change people behavior, which is also hard. It's another domain. Society of Behavioral Medicine, that's another society I'm trying to contribute to, where we try to use different behavior change models, understanding how do we feed this data, how do we provide it, and how do we change people behavior. From methodological perspective, well, that's fascinating. I did start it as a computer scientist by logging the phone. You know, phone is our sensor for behavior, you know it. And I started as instrumenting the Android and getting the sensors, like how do you touch your phone, what applications are you using, are you Wi-Fi on charging? This is very interesting behavior information. And then with time, we have added the wearables, and we started with Fitbit, many of you know. And then now, unfortunately, in Europe, we are much more constrained by different privacy and security. So we stick to Wi-Fi, which looks like a regular watch, and we do Oura Ring, we do continuous glucose monitor, but we really look into like where's the data sleeping at night, right? And so then we have these loggers, and we keep collecting all this information. So that's like a minute today. Then we do experience sampling method, ecological momentary assessment, depends which name you're using, and then because we have our application running on the phone, then it can pop up depending on the context. So we can ask you when you enter the house, we start charging the phone, pick up the phone first thing in the morning, so we can program these different pop-ups as we wish. And then along this, it was very, very interesting for us to get into day reconstruction methods. So diary, like a day, and once a week, we would ask the individuals to reconstruct for us in very qualitative and self-reported way last 24 hours of their life, with respect to the phenomena we are looking for. So if it's sleep or physical activity or stress, and then they tell us things and they use their own keywords, and then there is a lot of data to be coded. And then on the other side, we have the week or month. We have either open-ended or closed interview or semi-structured interview. And then I say surveys, but inside this interview and survey, there can be PROs, there could be one or multiple PROs depending on the study. And then there could be more like open discussion. But definitely there is something always we get as at the first study entry, we get something as a profile, right? So that's one of the part. What else I would like to tell about this is, as I said, some of my computer science students are complaining that there's too much qualitative data and they would rather prefer to work just with quantitative data, have everything structured. And I think that's also something we can tackle with education. I will not explain everything. I have a separate paper and I was giving this talk somewhere, but like if you look at overall here, I wanted to say that after interviewing, it was myself, it was very qualitative. I wanted to know how people use technologies anyway. Imagine we want to use technologies for evaluation of the quality of life in the context of their clinical care. Then I approach people sitting in the waiting room of the clinician, and they all look at the phone, like 90% of the time they look at the phone. So I had a protocol in which I approached them and I asked question, how do you use this technologies for your own health? If I've seen that somebody has an Apple Watch, it was at Stanford, or some other wearable, I was also questioning this, but it was very open question. So around 20% of people said no way. So that will be always like persons who will not accept use of technologies. Then another 20% is orange, is yes, maybe, but there's a privacy, there's a difficult and something. And then another, the 60%, which was somehow using it, I heard stories about what applications are being used. I heard stories how we should fix applications. I had people giving bullet points of how to fix this and that I should immediately call Apples and Googles and everything. So I pull it as the input, but I also pulled what are the factors influencing that they will use technologies for their own health care, self-care, not healthcare, also own self-care. And there's a lot about how people feel about this. There's a lot about how people feel about technologies. So it's not just like the accuracy and the features and how the app looks, but it's also about how they perceive it and how does it make them feel about their own health and state and their own identity in a sense. And it's even more pronounced. It's one of the biggest factors in sexual health. And I don't have results right now. No, actually today I did not plan to present the results. I do have results, but I did not plan. And that may be something we could schedule. I have an abstract for ISOQOL. And another view on our methods, we try to understand how to assure this internal, external validity of data and do different triangulations. So from the interview diaries, we pull different variables, we code it, we pull different variables, which we then insert into our machine. And then the other data is super dense and it's just, there's missing data, there's sometimes errors data. As I said, it's not clinical grade, and not all the data sources from these devices are clinically great. Like heart rate variable, heart rate is there, but like sleep not, or physical like steps, it's like whatever I should say. And we have a huge variability in this. So we are always like considering this in our making sense out of these different data sources. I also would like to say that for longitudinal studies where we had studies up to 3 years with healthy individuals, so it's mostly like natural history observational studies, then we do not do all the day ecological momenta assessments and collection. We'll do from time to time, once every 6 months, we'll have a repeated measures of self-reports, and maybe repeated measures of the PROs would be there and some health status. And then it depends on the protocol. We'll also have like ecological momenta assessments for up to 3-4 weeks maximum. And then we let people go and they just collect passively the data via wearable and via phone. And that works very well. And we have a data quality assurance. We see if the data is coming. If the data is not coming, we contact them. But if the data is coming and no news is a good news in our studies, in many cases, we keep doing. So getting back to this, we do like this different data sources, right? We consider them as a physiology functioning, and then interaction is the social and role functioning, and and also psychological functioning and the context. We pick up all this information, we do our machine learning, and then our labels are usually the pro, but we do also have some papers and some research when the clean row is a label, or perfo is a paper, or another TechRO is a paper. We also have proxy rows as a label, sorry, not as a paper, as a label. And then we do whatever is necessary from the machine learning perspective, regression, classification, unsupervised. But it's like a sketching painting. We do want to, I mean, I really want to learn so much from you and from the community of quality of life. We would like to provide these technologies, but I can see it's on one hand, there's so much push and there's so much, it's like there's so much to be done. And why is that? Because ideal endpoint, ideal data, I will tell you, please, tomorrow in a clinical trial, include this particular thing, and should be relevant, quantifiable, valid, objective, reliable, sensitive, specific, precise, and everything else. And that's really a work in progress. It's like developing story, because even if I told you that the way the person will touch the button, it's how does it make them feel, while you say how valuable is this pressing this or that. Oh my God. So back to square one. We are still in square one, many papers, but it's really not nice to also see how many papers I'm reviewing now in computer science. Some colleagues in computer science, just yet another sensor, yet another, just a label, and yet another machine learning. And it's so much efforts are being unfortunately wasted, and they just, anyway, I'm not complaining, I'm just saying we still have a long way to go. And I'm mostly, as I was at the beginning, I was thinking I'll do everything for everybody. Now I focus, since I came to Geneva 2 years ago, I said, okay, there will be type 2 diabetes, cognitive decline, breast cancer, sexual health, and migraine. That will be my partners in crime in Geneva, but also collaboration with Stanford. So I think I thank you. I just wanted to give you a snapshot and a bit of express that how much computer science are needing you. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for presenting. You have a wealth of data, of knowledge on all of these different spaces and opportunities to collect digital health information. So thank you. I will open it up to any questions that people might have for Dr. Walk. I can start. I can start. So I'm very interested in, you said you've collected diary information as well as the digital health. And, you know, that's clearly a great opportunity for mixed methods analysis. And how did you go about doing that? Did one complement the other? Are they in tandem being collected?
Sorry, yes. So at the beginning, it was mostly about reconstructing, like imagine you collect with your wearable or phone, you sleep, let's say wearable, sleep and physical activity, and then you come to the lab and we'll have in the interview, we'll have a view on your raw data, and then we'll ask you, without showing you, we'll ask you for a narrative of last 24 hours, and we'll look, how do we explain the missing data, and how do we explain, it's not that you're lying, but you may not remember, right? So if there's some abnormalities in the data, we'll ask you, and then we'll be able to say, wow, that's interesting, right? And then we had to add additional variable. I will give you an anecdote which will stay in you with you. We added cat variable into one of our participants because we give a Fitbit to the participants, and then it was supposed to measure quality of sleep. No, not quality of sleep. Sorry. I promised my colleagues in sleep quality. I'm not going to use quality of sleep because it's not reliable. Quantity of sleep, start and stop, and like placement and everything. When the configuration was as follows: if you pull your hand like this, it starts blinking, like the cat comes and jumps and starts playing with the wearable. The person comes a week later, I cannot sleep. What's wrong with your device? My cat is in many cases waking me up because it starts playing with my wearable because I'm moving at night, right? So we just reconfigure the device. It's a matter of reconfiguration, but you know, for a week we needed to kind of add this cat as a variable in the machine learning, right? So it helps us to understand so much. Like you cannot just rely on the pure sensor data. You cannot. Like this is irresponsible. Yeah.
That's great. Blame the cat for the missing data.
It was interactions, right? So yeah.
Yeah.
but it's really like whoever works with computer scientists, like help them to understand what's happening. And even myself, I was shadowing the patients just without any digital health technologies. I just wanted to see where they are from education perspective, what language they talk, and then when I talk to them sitting in the waiting room and looking at the phones, I also understood how some of them are far from understanding how this technology could be used for their own self-care or even assessment, right? So it's like, it's fascinating. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Amazing. I know you have another meeting. Any last questions?
Hi, this is Pat Kuchecki. I have a really quick question, I think. From my research, or from what I know, I should say, I think that the correlation between objective measures and PROs, for instance, the correlation is oftentimes not very high. But there is a correlation. So I'm just, when you think about correlations, maybe you don't expect to get high correlations, and so people need to understand that. I think
that is correct. And honestly speaking, we had this huge discussion with Nancy Mayo about this. She said if you see something around 0.45 or 0.5, you already have some signal because it was never there. So now it's like a hypothesis generation. And then how would you get about identifying how do you test this hypothesis, right? How do you define some other experiments in which you try to really tease out this? So it's a fascinating question. And then and then sometimes in the past, in my students, we had correlations of something is increasing, your physical activity is increasing, and then your well-being is increasing, you self-reported well-being and this and that. And we had a 0.7, and my students like, oh my God, this is so bad. This is so bad. These people in medical, they are going to be so disappointed in us, right? And then there was another day I was sitting in some meeting, and there was a person from Harvard presenting 0.44. Ah, this is so good. And I was like, I made a screenshot. I was like, what's wrong? So we are looking for a signal.
Yeah, my personal view is that a moderate correlation is good, really good.
Yeah.
If you see that means something, but that's just
Yeah. But then it also depends how much data you have. Then also it starts from the quality of the data. Is the sensor really measuring what's
right, like, of course,
accuracy, and so the technical part is very important, but it's very not so nice that many of us, and if my colleagues are stopping at the technical part, writing paper. I got my PhD, I get this, I'm done. Somebody else takes over. So I like to go for the full path. Yeah.
Very good, wonderful presentation.
Thank you. If I could be of any help, and I hope at ISOQOL I'm presenting sexual health. There's so much more.